This is the very last and final part of a 4-part series on maturing your security operations center. In this talk, we'll be focusing on the technology part of the Splunk Security Maturity Methodology, or S2M2, and what it's really all about. So for those of you that haven't been on any of the previous talks, I'm Paul Pelletier, and I'll be your host for this series. I've been here at Splunk for nearly 4 years, and I'm a global security architect within Professional Services. I've been in InfoSec for nearly 20 years, and I've done everything from working at a small hometown bank where I first got the security bug, to owning my own MSSP, to working at some of the largest consulting firms in the world, and finally here at Splunk. I built and ran world-class SOCs across the globe for multiple Fortune 10, 50, and 500 companies. Security maturity has always been a passion of mine, which is why I've come up with S2M2. So what is this S2M2 that we speak of? Let's get into it. But first, a quick agenda for what we're going to cover today. We'll start off by giving you a recap of what S2M2 is, just in case you missed it in any of the previous sessions. What does the overall structure of this S2M2 assessment look like? Then we'll do that deep dive into the technology aspect of S2M2, and then we'll talk about outcomes. What can you actually expect as a result from all of this? So again, this is not just another vendor maturity thing. The Splunk Security Maturity Methodology, or S2M2, uses industry standards and frameworks to measure your security program maturity, and it defines a prescriptive path forward for a more mature security program with our platform, using that combination of people, process, and technology across the entire Splunk security ecosystem. This is that blueprint for how to build a SOC with Splunk. This is the Splunk way of doing security. It's all about increasing your time to value and fully operationalizing your investment in the platform. It's also that guided journey with Splunk as your trusted advisor to help you progress up the maturity curve. It's the interlock between the pre- and post-sales teams here at Splunk, so that we provide you with a unified customer experience. At the same time, it's that meta framework, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Splunk is your security to everything platform. S2M2 is how we bring it all together, and we use this methodology to increase your time to value and identify where your gaps are and how we can help. So in terms of a meta framework, S2M2 encompasses all the major security and compliance frameworks. So regardless of which security framework you choose to align against, if that's NIST, ISO 27000X, COBIT, ISA 62443, etc., or whatever compliance framework is applicable to you, whether that's PCI or HIPAA, GLBA, GDPR, SOCs, or whatever detection framework you choose, MITRE, KillChain, or your response framework of choice, ADS, React. S2M2 can accommodate all of these and ensure that you have the right monitoring controls in place, the right types of detections, the right types of content and visualizations. At Splunk, we believe that every security program can be a great program and should be a great program. But to get to that state, we really need to understand where you are, why you're there, and where you want to be. That's S2M2. That's what this is all about. We've worked with thousands of customers, both large and small, on their journey from taking them from a purely reactive state like you see on the far left here, which is often focused on legacy security concepts like parametric defense and zero risk attempt, and then helping them to figure out the reasons why that was the focus. But then we've also seen programs built solely for compliance purposes. We've seen dozens of programs that were deemed a cost center to the organization and not an enabler of the business. With S2M2, we look to understand the original plan. Then we map that to what we have today, which is in the center. And we ask ourselves, what are we monitoring? Why? What are we alerting on? Why? Are these alerts valuable? Do we have enough people? Do our people have the right skill sets? What does process and procedure look like for incident response, for example? And what does the desired future state look like all the way on the far right? Are we going to prioritize all of our activity based on measuring and reducing risk? What are the right applications to monitor? What does alerting and automation need to look like to achieve these end state goals? And what does the desired future state really look like? Are we going to prioritize all of our activity around risk? And then the way this is laid out is into 4 primary sections. And then each major section is broken into subcategories. The whole idea is that we want to be very holistic in our approach in terms of security operations as a whole, and not just 100% focused on SOC. That's a big part of S2M2 and what we do here at Splunk. But we want to be able to take the results from this exercise, feed them into your customer success plans, along with your customer success manager, and provide you with that maturity measurement and what the roadmap going forward with Splunk as your security platform actually looks like. So let's talk some more about the structure of this exercise. So who do we really need when we kick this off? What types of personas do we kind of need to have in the room or on the Zoom call, as we've all been accustomed to here lately? Initially, we want to start out with the first 30 minutes or to 45 minutes and have that executive level conversation in terms of platform alignment with business requirements. What is your strategy? What are your goals, your short-term, long-term? And really figure out, what does success actually look like for you as a security operations organization with Splunk, right? And this is super critical, especially in terms of executive sponsorship. So we really want to make sure we get this alignment right up front before doing anything else. But then for the rest of this exercise, overall, this takes about 4 hours to go through the entire set of questions, about 120 questions overall. We really want to have the deeper conversations with like your SOC manager, SOC director, along with some senior type analysts, like your senior SOC analysts, threat analysts, incident responders. If you have malware analysts, whoever else that you have that senior level representation that can really deep dive into the rest of this content. So initially, the way we typically start out is we make sure that we have the right audience available first. Then we kind of send out the email to the customer to schedule that 4-hour session, make sure that everybody will be able to attend. Then we go, and then once we have that meeting scheduled, and then we conduct the actual assessment, we kind of start off with a high-level introduction, and then it's kind of a question and answer format in terms of going forward with the rest of these things, right? And then we'll give you some high-level results. We'll give you your maturity ranking, and then we'll put together a more formalized report and come back with like an executive overview and really start to show how we can help you together in working on your security operations from a program level perspective, right? So again, this is kind of a 4-step process that roughly takes 4 hours of Q&A with various levels of security folks within your organization. The actual delivery of these materials, it takes about an hour as well, and it's usually kind of planned a week after the actual workshop was conducted. And then again, if you decide to leverage Splunk services to increase your time to value, we would plan a kind of more of a 2-week long kind of workshop with our services team where we really dive down into what do we actually need in terms of remediation and prioritization of all the different tasks. What do we actually need to do and when, and who's going to do those kind of things. And lastly, this is also a way of continuous iteration across all security operations where we measure your progress and we determine what needs to tweak as we continue to improve, and then this makes us more agile so that we can quickly kind of talk about what to expect in terms of the different expectations and outcomes and from the different sections as well. And so typically we start off, again, you heard me mention this, executive level kind of conversation in terms of the SOC profile. So these first 2 tabs of this assessment is where we have these types of this kind of conversation. Really figure out what are your key business needs, and then how are we going to align the platform to those key business needs and requirements, right? Then there's another tab where we talk more in terms of the business justification of doing this as a program, how it's going to be important to you, how it's going to actually help you save money, how we're going to help you reduce visibility, increase visibility, reduce false positives, and reduce the amount of time you're spending on triage and investigation so that you can go do more high value activities like threat hunting, for example, and get rid of a lot of those mundane kind of tasks that we're used to doing within security operations. Then the next part is where we talk about people, right? So what are the different, and again, there's 3 subcategories here, 22 questions in this section, and this is where we talk more in terms of how are your staffing roles? Are they broken down? Are there different job segregations within security operations? And then what types of specific training to those roles do you get in terms of the platform? And then what other types of additional kind of capabilities like scripting, et cetera, do your people have? Then the next section is where we talk about process. And again, this is not where we want to audit your processes. We don't want you to give us a document that says, hey, I have this process. This is more in terms of how are you actually doing these things with Splunk as your security operations platform? What does the workflow actually really look like for these different things? What are the more succinct type of operational capabilities that you actually have around these different activities within security operations? How are you actually doing insider threat and managing fraud, etc., within security operations? Those are the kind of things we really want to dive into. And then in terms of best practices, based on our years of experience from our security practitioners, how should you actually be doing these things within security operations with Splunk? And then how are you actually measuring the effectiveness of the SOC, MTTD, MTTR, and making sure that the business sees the value in everything that we're doing as security operations? Because at the end of the day, if we don't show value to the business, we are just another cost center. And then how are we doing attribution and risk? How are we keeping risk central to everything that we do within security operations? And then lastly, technology. So this is really about and this is the longest section. There's 68 total questions. But this is really focusing on the logs that we have available, knowing what's normal, and then adding some additional contextualization about those things. We're going to dive deeper into this in just a second, because remember, that's what this session really focuses on, is the technology part of all this. So let's talk about technology. Why is this all important to us? What does this really mean? And how do we kind of go forward from here? So the 3 primary missions within security operations should be around prevention, detection, and protection. How do we affect these different dimensions with something like S2M2? We have to build effective processes and workflows into the platform to enable each of these pillars within security operations. We have to utilize best practices that have been established by our team of security practitioners. We need the right kinds and type of reporting, and we have to make sure that risk is central to everything that the SOC does. So, as we previously mentioned, this section is focused on the technology aspect of S2M2. So let's quickly recap what this section is about, and we'll go into more detail in just a second. So again, this is the longest section. Like I mentioned, 68 questions overall, mainly because we talk about a lot of the security relevant data sources. That's over half of the questions in this section. There's only 3 subcategories here, but it's very heavy on the data source. But then we talk about reference data, and lastly, contextualization. So let's take a deeper look in the first section of technology, which is data availability. What are we getting at here? So this is really about having the right data to support the right use cases and detections, which is essential to having the proper visibility across your organization's cyber landscape. Without the right data, you can't see what's happening. And without the right things in the data, you don't have the proper amount of intelligence to quickly and efficiently make decisions about what to do next with a potential incident. For example, with all the hoopla around supply chain attacks in the media, if you had logs from things like Sysmon, or even full logs from EDR, and you were able to see process executions, things like event ID 4688 or event code 1 from Sysmon, PowerShell logging, Windows security logs, authentication logs, you'd be able to detect the general pattern of activity that most of these attacks follow, and be in a lot better spot than you probably are now. But then data onboarding goes hand in hand with this. you need to be able to have some type of process that you follow, very similar to what you see here. This isn't necessarily a maturity thing in terms of technology. This is really more of a process thing, but it's essential to having a healthy and performant data analytics platform with Splunk. This is exactly the type of activity you can expect our experts to help you build out from a best practices perspective and help you ensure that your organization is not only doing things correctly, but efficiently. Now on to the second section of technology, security reference data. This is all about knowing yourself. You have to know what is normal, like what is a service account? What's an admin account? Who are your VIPs? Who are your executives? You have to know things like what are your allowed applications within your environment, known allowed ports, known allowed services, known good network locations and subnets, etc. All of these things are essential to good cyber hygiene and are integral to the platform in terms of being able to provide the appropriate intelligence in your detections. These things are oftentimes overlooked, but if we're going to get better at security operations, we have to know all of these things and make this all available to the platform. Now for the last and final section of S2M2, data contextualization. This last section covers how you are consuming your alerts. What does your alert pipeline actually look like? How are you doing alerting? Are you using pattern-based detections, static or dynamic detections? Why are you using those kinds of detections? And finally, what does it actually give you? What are you doing with the results from those detections? Are you enriching the events with some third-party data? Are you taking some action using orchestration and automation? Are you tracking all these events with some type of case management system? How is triage performed? How do you identify false positives and false negatives? Do these ultimately wind up somewhere in a report to demonstrate how well you're actually detecting things, how fast, like mean time to respond, mean time to detect? All of these things together is how we demonstrate the value of security operations to the business and how we're helping the business to succeed through security. So let's talk about outcomes real quickly. What can you actually expect once we've run through this whole assessment? We've talked about the SOC profile, people, process, and technology at this point. So what do we actually get when we're done? And again, the difference between S2M2 and some other generic vendor maturity assessment is that we're really laying out how to build a SOC using our technology suite, our entire security stack of not just core, but enterprise security, plus UBA, plus Phantom, as well as how do you fully operationalize your investment in Splunk that you have right now, and how can we help you progress up the security suite all at the same time. And then we'll give you some high-level recommendations, which will provide a starting point for your journey to becoming more mature. If you really want to deep dive into what is truly required to have us take you on a more curated security journey, then let us tell you about our security maturity roadmap, where PS, our professional services team, can help assist you in accomplishing your goals faster and realizing value even quicker. Maturity is great, but then how do you actually take action on all these findings? This is where the maturity roadmap piece comes into play. This is all about actioning what is important to you and prioritizing all of those different activities. This roadmap is also a great way for us to help you as an assigned expert to really become part of your team and embedded with your team and help you move up that maturity roadmap and push this as a program level objective across your organization. This roadmap is really key to your success in terms of security maturity. So just to wrap things up, the big thing here is obviously S2M2, it's here, it's ready to go, and we want to do one, come in, help you figure out where you're at and where you want to get to, and then how are we going to actually operationalize those things. So let's work together and make your security operations team better and more efficient. The roadmap, again, that's our secret sauce. We really want to help you develop that roadmap and lay out what the journey actually looks like for you. And again, that journey, it's 4 maturity levels. It's a process, but our job is to use this tool to help kind of figure out where you are versus where you want to get to. And it's all about progress. Progress tied to outcomes equals value. So let's schedule a workshop and get this thing going. And the typical legal kind of forward-looking statements, we have to put this in here kind of thing, so enjoy. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. We hope you found this very informative. And if you have any questions or feedback, you can please feel free to contact myself. My email, it's pretty easy. Just p2@splunk.com. Don't worry about trying to spell my last name. Or if you're a partner and you're on Slack, you can go to s2m2-help or contact any member of our security practice as well. And again, thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions, and we will be answering those questions here shortly. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Paul. My name is Alex Felici. I am a part of the security product marketing team. Just want to start off by thanking you for your presentation today and for everybody coming in and checking out what S2M2 has to offer for everybody. Before I get into a couple of the questions that have come in, I'd just like to reiterate that if anyone attending right now has any questions, you can just go ahead and put those into the Q&A form for us. But Paul, let's just get right into it.
It sounds great. And yeah, thank you everybody for attending.
Great. So our first question coming in is, how long has this methodology been in place at Splunk?
Yeah, so roughly around since January of this year. And, we saw a need for it. Our customers asked for something like this. And so, we developed this in terms of security maturity. And, we're really working really hard to help our customers use this to move the needle in terms of security maturity and just to get better within security operations.
Absolutely, makes sense. Definitely a huge help to all of our customers who've been a part of it. Our second question that comes in is, I didn't see anything about the cost considerations for this program. Could you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, there's kind of two parts to this, right? Whereas the assessment piece, that's free, right? We would come in, we'll do about a 4-hour-long kind of question and answer session where we'll run through and ask you these different things in terms of people, process, technology, and business alignment with the platform. And then we'll provide you with your kind of, high-level maturity ranking, kind of break it down by subcategory as well. We'll give you some high-level next steps. But then the second part of this is where you would actually engage with us from a services perspective to come and help build out the actual maturity roadmap piece in terms of what are all the activities that would be required to go from your current maturity level to your desired maturity level. And then what does that look like in terms of level of effort and who's going to be responsible and how do we actually align those against some operational phases and then actually start to remediate these things, right? So that's about a 2-week-long engagement that you would have with our professional services team to build the maturity roadmap piece. And you can get with your regional sales manager, and they can help get you the pricing on those things.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that response. I think that clears up that question. It looks like we have one more in the docket, but again, I'd like to just send it out to all of our attendees. If you have anything else on the top of your mind, we're here to help, and please just go ahead and send it into the chat. So for our last question is, how long does this journey usually take? Once you guys start the process, what kind of time frame would we be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual assessment, like I said earlier, and probably a couple of times in the presentation, is that it takes about 4 hours to go through that, all the questions and everything, right? But then in terms of actually the maturity journey, that's entirely up to you as the customer, right? And at that point, it really becomes more of a resourcing question than anything else. Because, if we identify you need to do 25 things, for example, and you only have a staff of 2, well, then how are we going to accomplish these things and in what time frame? And are you going to need help kind of thing, whether that's from us or one of our partners, or how can we help you guys achieve your ultimate goal of whatever your desired maturity level is, as well as your objectives within security operations. That's what this is all about, right? And helping you to get to value faster along our entire security ecosystem. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's but the whole thing is that we really want to sit down with you as the customer and let's talk about security maturity and use this as a tool to kind of figure out where you're at and how we can help you get to where you're trying to go. So let's, schedule some of these workshops, reach out to your regional sales manager and tell them this is something you heard about that you're interested in, and let's do it.
Absolutely, and it sounds like that the ability to really create that value for the customer, whether it's a small or large team, is one of the main benefits of this.
Exactly.
Unless anyone else has a question they want to pop into the chat, we'll give it a few more seconds here. But if not, I'd like to just sign off by saying thank you to Paul for putting this presentation together for us and your time today.
No, yeah, and thank you again, everybody, for coming and listening, and we hope you found this valuable.
Thank you. And please feel free to reach out if you guys have any other questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.